Well, thanks for joining me for our lesson in the book of Philippians. Today we're going to be in Philippians chapter 1, and we're going to look at this idea of joy in adversity. Have you ever seen a good thing come from a bad thing? Sometimes in life we have bad things happen to us, and then when we look back on it years later or months later, we see the good stuff that came from that. Well, today in our lesson, we're going to be studying the words of Paul. And Paul is writing from in prison. And Paul is facing two things, life or death. And that process, Paul says, I'm going to focus on the good things, not the bad things. And I think we're going to see that in this lesson that we can learn that believers can face adversity in the joy of knowing the gospel is spread. I've got here with me a glass. The glass has some water in it. I put some food coloring in it so you could see that it has something in it. And we ask somebody in life, is this half full or is it half empty? Well, the way they respond often, we think, we say, reflects how they see life. They see life as half full, they're optimistic, or it's half empty, they're pessimistic. Today in our story, Paul has the option of looking at life from one way or another. Is his life half full or is it half empty? Well, in today's lesson, we're going to pick up in chapter 1, and we're going to be verses 12 through 26. And these first two verses, though, I want you to listen for how Paul says that his purpose was fulfilled. Now, I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually advanced the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else that my imprisonment is because I am in Christ. Most of the brothers have gained confidence in the Lord from my imprisonment and dare even more to speak the word fearlessly. Now, Paul's in prison, and Paul's facing a rough time. But Paul's adversity didn't begin when he got to this prison. Paul's been facing trials and struggles for quite a long time. Remember, he's traveled all over the Mediterranean. He's started churches here and there. He's visited city here and there. He's been on boats. He's been on shipwrecks. He's been beaten. Oh, wait just a second. Let's see what Paul says about his adversities. Look over at 2 Corinthians chapter 11. 5 times I received the 40 lashes, minus the one from the Jews. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I received a stoning. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I have spent a night and a day in the open sea. On frequent journeys I faced dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my own people, dangers from Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers among false brothers, toil and hardship, many sleepless nights, hunger and thirst, often without food, cold and without clothing, not to mention other things. There is the daily pressure on me, my concern for all the churches. Now, we can view all these things as a glass half-empty situation. And Paul gives us this long list, and he says to the Philippians, I know y'all see this as a glass half-empty. I know y'all are worried about me, but I want you to know all this adversity that I'm facing, all these things that have happened to me, it's not that bad. Oh, it's bad. It's the bad stuff's happened, but it's not that bad. Because go back to Philippians. What does he say in chapter 1, verses 13 and 14? He says some good things have happened. He says, first, the imperial guard, the entire imperial guard knows why I'm in jail. They know I'm not a vile person. They know I didn't do anything to get here, or I hurt somebody, or I stole something. They know I'm here because of Christ. The imperial guard, that is the elite of the Roman guard. That's the ones who guard the Caesar, the ones who maintain peace in the city of Rome. They know. They know why I'm here. Then he says, and also the other believers, because of my suffering, because of all the bad stuff that's happened to me, they're sharing the gospel more. They're out there. They are fearless. They are sharing the gospel, and they are telling people about Jesus because of the suffering that I've seen. Because of my example, because of the bad stuff that I've endured, they are out there sharing the gospel. Look, if you've got your personal study guide, look at page 22 and look at this question. How does persecution open the door for sharing Jesus? And what examples can be pointed to in answering this question? In life, we might not be where Paul is, but we face adversity. Sometimes we face adversity because that's just what happens in life. Bad things happen to us. Sometimes we face adversity because we choose to follow the Lord instead of doing what other people might have us do. And we face adversity, we open opportunities to share the gospel. When bad things happen to us just because that's life, when we get sick, when maybe we have financial issues that come up, and those are opportunities for us to tell people about the Lord. When we face adversity because we decide to follow Jesus, people might say, why are you doing that? Why do you suffer the consequences because you don't do this or don't do that? And you say, well, I don't do this or that because I follow Jesus and Jesus has me do this. And the consequences, they're just what they are. Opportunities to share the gospel with people. I think that we can learn this process that persecution for the gospel or adversity in following Jesus leads to opportunities to share the gospel. Now, Paul says, my example has led others to be fearless to sharing the gospel. It's led others to go out there and expand the kingdom. Let's look now at Philippians, and let's see what Paul says about those who are sharing the gospel fearlessly because of his example. To be sure, some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. These preach out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. The others proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, thinking that they will cause me trouble in my imprisonment. What does it matter? Only that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is proclaimed, and in this I rejoice. Yes, I will continue to rejoice. Now, Paul says there are two types of people who are sharing the gospel in the city of Rome. He says that group one, they share the gospel out of envy, out of rivalry, seeking to cause Paul harm while he's in prison. The other people preach it out of love and goodwill. You see, there are people with the wrong motives. And we don't understand exactly what's going on and why these people are acting this way. But Paul says they're out there sharing the gospel with the wrong motives. And there's some sharing the gospel with the right motives. I want you to consider this question. Why would God allow people with bad motives to be part of his kingdom advancement? Man, why would God allow people with bad motives to be part of his kingdom advancement? Why does God allow me to be part of his kingdom advancement? Why does God allow any of us to be part of his kingdom advancement? He saves us and he cleanses of our sin, but guess what? We still sin occasionally. We still have bad motives. We still do the wrong thing. And Paul says these people have bad motives, but they're sharing the gospel. They're not messing with the gospel. They're not distorting the gospel. In other places, Paul calls out people who are distorting the gospel. He says, the people who are distorting the gospel, he says, y'all get it right. Y'all stop that. Y'all avoid those who are doing that type of thing. But here he says, these people, they're sharing the gospel. They've got wrong motives, but they're sharing the gospel fully and completely. And man, we can be like, I don't know about that. But Paul says, what of it? He says, what does it matter? They're sharing the gospel. Yeah, they're trying to get me in trouble. They're trying to cause me trouble, trying to cause me problems while I'm in prison. He says, whatever. I'm not worried about what they think about me. I'm not worried about why they're coming at me. They're sharing the gospel full on. And what they think and what they feel is that ain't my problem. Now, we need to be safe. We need to be secure when we are encountering people in ministry. We need to make sure that those we encounter, if they have bad motives, whatever. But maybe if they have malicious purposes or they're destroying the gospel, we need to be careful about that. But I can't fix their motives. I can't fix their thought processes sometimes. And Paul says if they're sharing the gospel and they're not hurting anybody, then it's not my problem. And guess what? The kingdom is advancing. Paul says they're sharing the gospel. People are getting saved. God can deal with their motives. That's not my issue. I celebrate the fact that folks are getting saved and the kingdom is advancing. Sometimes in life, we're going to encounter people in church, people who have the wrong motives. Maybe it's another Sunday school teacher, another small group leader. Maybe it's another person you volunteer with. And you think, man, their motives are kind of weird. They seem like they're in a rivalry with people or they're trying to get at people sometimes in the way they do stuff. But they're doing well. They're doing the work. I'm not going to worry about their motives, I guess. Now, again, if they're being malicious or if they're destroying the gospel, we got to deal with that. Maybe leaders need to deal with that. But as a person just working in ministry, celebrate their wins. I know it's hard. I know it seems kind of off, but the kingdom is advancing. And Paul says, I can't fix them. I can't fix their thoughts. I can't fix their issues. I'm going to pray for them, and I'm going to let them serve the Lord and let the Lord grow them up. Let the Lord change them. In this, we can learn that faithful proclaimers of the gospel keep their focus on its advance, not on personal slights or distractions. Now, what's crazy in the midst of all this, Paul's in prison. Paul's seeing people out there preaching the gospel with the wrong motives. And again, Paul can't fix them, and Paul celebrates the advancement of the gospel. And he does all this with joy, he says. And let's look now, and let's see where Paul's joy is. Let's see where Paul's joy comes from. Because I know this will lead to my salvation through your prayers and help from the Spirit of Jesus Christ. My eager expectation and hope is that I will not be ashamed of anything, but that now as always, with all courage, Christ will be highly honored in my body, whether by life or by death. For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Paul says, I find joy in my confidence in a Lord that answers your prayers. But that brings us back to our glass, our half full or half empty glass. You know, I said earlier that Paul doesn't see the glass as either half full or half empty. The glass is simply a tool that he uses. The glass is his life that he uses for the advancement of the gospel. His life is a tool. No matter the situation, good, bad, life, death, bemoan death, celebrate the fact he can be released, he doesn't do any of that. He says, my life is a tool for the advancement of the gospel. I want you to consider this question. What circumstances in life make it hard to focus on God's plan and purposes instead of those circumstances? Now, in life, we can focus on the bad circumstances. They can take our eyes off of God's kingdom and God's purposes and God's plans for our life. We can look at just the bad stuff and think, oh man, we can bemoan that all day long. Or we can be like Paul and we can say, my life is a tool for the advancement of God's kingdom. My life is here just for that purpose. And I'm not going to focus on the bad stuff. I'm not going to focus just on the good stuff. I'm going to say, God, what are you doing? God, where are you using me? God, where can you use me? I think in this process, we can see that believers honor God by being faithful to Him in life and in death. Now, let's finish up and let's look at Paul's exploration of the good and the bad circumstances of life. Look at Philippians chapter 1, verses 22 through 26. Now, if I live on in the flesh, this means fruitful work for me, and I don't know which one I should choose. I'm torn between the two. I long to depart and be with Christ, which is far better, but to remain in the flesh is more necessary for your sake. Since I am persuaded of this, I know that I will remain and continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith, so that because of my coming to you again, your boasting in Jesus Christ may abound. Now, in this passage, Paul weighs his situation out. He looks at the good and he looks at the bad. And he kind of has a weird dichotomy here. It's something that we might not pick up on if we were Paul, if we were in Paul's situation. See, Paul says the glass half empty part, the fact that he is probably going to die, well, for him, that's the full part. And the part that we might see as full, the fact that he might be released, he says, well, that's the empty part for him. You see, because of Paul's understanding of God's kingdom and God's purposes for his life, everything gets flipped on in. The good part becomes the bad part in our mind. The bad part becomes the good part. In the kingdom, everything's flipped upside down. You see, Paul understood that he could die. And Paul says, man, it'd be nice to be with Jesus. Paul understands that he could be released. And he says, man, it'd be really nice to come help grow you up in Christ, to help come teach y'all some more in Philippi. Man, I really do want to be with Jesus. But you know what? I want to do Jesus' purposes and God's plans for my life. I want to do that more than I want what I think is best. I think because what's best for you, I think I'm going to be released. I think because it's better for you that I come and teach you that I'm going to get out of here. But you see, Paul understands that what he wants, what he desires, and what he thinks is going to happen, those aren't necessarily the best thing. He says, to live is Christ and to die is gain. He says, you know, whatever God wants, that's the best. Whatever happens, happens. And I understand that God has a purpose for my death if I die, and God has a purpose for my life if I live. You see, in our life, we're not facing what Paul's facing probably. We're not sitting between life and death and having that go on in our life, but we are facing good things and bad things in our life. We're facing things that we want to do and things that are better for others maybe. I think we can learn from Paul that we need to choose what's best for others. Because of his love, Paul says, I'm going to forego what I want. I'm going to come and I'm going to teach you in Philippi when I get released. And I think that's what's best for you, and I think that's what's going to happen. In this process, we can learn that the encouragement of other believers produces joy and purpose in the one who encourages. I think today we see a few things. We see that Paul's imprisonment opened doors for people. Opened doors for people to hear the gospel, and opened doors for people to share the gospel. We see that in Paul's situation, there are people out there sharing the gospel more. And some of them have bad motives. And Paul says, man, I can't fix them. Just let the gospel go out. Let the kingdom grow. And then Paul says, the circumstances in my life can honor God. Whether those are good circumstances or bad circumstances, they can honor the Lord. And then Paul chooses the benefit of others over himself. So I have two challenges for you this week. First off, how do you see your life? We all have a life, and it's got liquid in it. We've got circumstances going on in our life. Those circumstances are good, those circumstances are bad. I don't know where you are. But what you have is not just a glass half empty or a glass half full. What you've got is a tool for kingdom advancement. No matter where you are or what's going on, you can advance the kingdom from your situation, inside your circumstances. I want to challenge you this week. Ask the Lord to show you how you can be a tool for kingdom advancement in the midst of your situation. But also, where are the open doors? Paul was in a prison full of locked doors. But in that prison, he found doors that were open to share the gospel. He made sure all the guards knew why he was there. He made sure they knew he wasn't there because he killed somebody. He wasn't there because he stole something. He was there because he taught about Jesus. He made sure that he told them that because he saw open doors in the midst of a room of closed doors. Where are the open doors in your life? Your situation may be rough. Your situation may be bad, but are there open doors to share the gospel? I want to challenge you this week. Find those open doors and share the gospel with people and find joy in adversity. I'll see you next week.